But Elmar Toime, we're really honored to have you conduct this panel. Elmar, thank you. It's all yours.
Thank you very much, John, and good morning, everybody. I live in London now. I hope you understand the very sort of solid Australian accent that I have. I had a lot of involvement, of course, with posts, and I do think of things from the operator point of view, and if we looked at that session we've just had, you can see consumer choice is adding a lot of complexity, and it's making it harder for the operator and for the actual people doing the last mile delivery. Because in your street and in my street, there'll be one person who wants a parcel locker, the next person will want a home delivery, the third person will want a deferred delivery, the fourth person might have installed the box that we've seen. And the carrier, the last mile carrier, still has to drive down that street or walk down that street with the package. So it's increasing costs there. It's putting costs onto the consumer, the receiver, because they might pay for some of these extra services. And so it's adding complexity and cost, and we all heard how we as the receivers and the consumers don't want to pay for any of this delivery. So it's quite a fascinating situation. But now we're jumping from last mile into intercontinental and the cross-border issues of transferring parcels and packages and e-commerce. And it's fantastic because it's not only the big brand names who can expand across the globe in a different model, but the artisan worker in the remote mountains of Peru now, in principle, can make artisanal products available to the global market if there's some intermediaries to help. So it's really terrific. And the conversation we're going to have now is, well, how's it going? What more can be done in cross-border commerce? And we have a terrific panel here. I'll just introduce them briefly and then they'll come and say their piece. So we're going to start with Phil Warker from the Policy Office of the Department of Homeland Security. We're all fair to say that this increase in duty-free allowances, as I understand it, from 200 to 800 is phenomenal, and it really will have a big impact on commerce. And Phil was going to tell us, I'm sure, about why that's happened. And his own background has been in trade, international affairs, and I think even a career in the USPS at some point. Next panellist will be Tom Forbes. From Medipac. He's responsible for Medipac's international activities with a specific focus on leveraging and enhancing the global label library. So there's about 300 carriers and thousands of services accessed through that. Again, he has a career in supply chain and logistics. Then Shoshana Grove, the new CEO of International Bridge, fast-growing global transportation company and specialising in emerging and hard-to-serve markets. And certainly Shoshana's had a career that's not only in this commercial areas, but also in the Postal Regulatory Commission, and before that in the USPS in marketing. And then our last speaker in the panel will be Giselle Valera, who's the Vice President and Managing Director of the Global Business Profit Centre of the USPS, a $3 billion business. She's had a distinguished career in the service, but before that in the areas of consulting for growth and process innovation. So that's our panel, and we'll start straight away with you, Phil. Thank you.
Excellent. That's a quick one.
That was green button.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Wendy Aton was supposed to be here to talk about UPU product development, but a couple of weeks ago, John called and asked if I would come because she couldn't make it. And he asked me to talk about the increase in the de minimis, the duty threshold from 200 to 800. That's a pretty dry, exact topic. So I'm also going to talk a bit about e-commerce at the end of this. So first thing, it's very rare I would let a law speak for itself, but I'll go through this because I think it's sure. Is that better? Okay. Yeah. There you go. Okay. If if people at Homeland Security have enough trouble without microphones. So, all right, so this is the law, and it's very recent. It's the Trade Facilitation and Trade Enforcement Act of 2015. And as it says in the law, the first point of this was, in terms of the de minimis, going from 200 to 800, was to modernize international customs. The idea is that it's very critical for U.S. businesses, for all of us and all consumers to help economic growth. And that's obviously a good thing, because now, instead of having potentially things being dutiable over 200, it's over 800. So that to us is a very big thing. I think it's for e-commerce, obviously. Effectively, a lot of things can come in under the informal entry process and not require an entry. And this will also, I think, solve a lot of other problems, because you won't have a lot of duty refund issues. Duty drawback isn't such an issue with low value shipments. But we just think in terms of making things sort of a duty-free zone for e-commerce, this is a good thing. And from a Homeland Security standpoint, it's good, because it's less that we have to do. We have to write fewer entries, especially in the mail environment, which is a very manual process still. So it's going to help, I think, bring trade in. And again, number 2 there, the higher thresholds, we think it's good. It does reduce customs cost, and it encourages commerce, and there's just a lot of cost savings there. This is an interesting point. Point B here, the sense of commerce that USTR should pursue and encourage other countries to adopt a similar approach. We think this is important because I don't think we're the problem. I mean, $800 is pretty good. $200 was pretty good. The problems that we see are more in other countries, Canada, Mexico, and around the world. The idea of having a sort of a duty-free zone for especially e-commerce shipments to us is attractive. I think that in terms of global trade, again, on the security side, but just in terms of business, I think this is probably a good thing for everybody. So that was a good thing. And I know in some of the trade agreements, this comes up quite a bit with USTR. So I'm involved with that a bit from my shop. Just number C, it goes from 200 to 800. Again, it's a pretty obvious thing. Okay. The effective date, within 15 days, I'll get to that. So what's happened? So it's already in place. It's happened March 10th. It wasn't a big impact on our systems. ACE, which you might know is the automated commercial environment, there was a small change that had to be made, but it was fairly low impact. And CBP is going to be trying to issue an interim final rule fairly soon on this, but it's already in place. So if you are importing, you should see the new change. Obviously, we'll get a lot more informal entries coming in because of the change. And an important note is that it really doesn't change anything else. It changes the value exemption from 200 to 800. But if you've got something coming in that requires a more formal entry, something that might have trade enforcement implications or safety, there are things that still require additional paperwork to be filed. So that doesn't change that. It's just the value exception that got changed. All right, let me talk about e-commerce a bit. I told you de minimis is sort of kind of is what it is. Okay, it's a great thing. But in terms of e-commerce, we think the de minimis fits into our overall strategy on this. And what we're doing, it's in its embryonic stages, but I wanted to share it with you. So we're trying to develop a holistic strategy on e-commerce. We think obviously this is changing the way things are moving. A lot of our regulations, a lot of our systems have been based on heavy cargo coming in through maritime. And then, of course, some general air cargo. We've worked with the express operators for years on things to accommodate their needs, but everything's changing. I mean, e-commerce is growing. The volumes are just really picking up. So we think we need to address this and maybe look at what we do as customs, as TSA, and everybody else to sort of change this. So again, there's a lot of volume, but with that comes more risk. You've got a lot of small shipments coming in from we don't know who. Okay, so we see this as an opportunity to partner with people. We've worked with USPS extremely well for so many years. They've been a great partner in terms of what we're trying to do in terms of raising the bar on advanced data, for example. And of course, we've worked with the express couriers on ACAS, which is air cargo security. So we feel like this model of working cooperatively has been good to us, and I think good for everybody else. So We see this as a way to work together with postal operators, with express operators, with cargo, to develop a strategy that sort of meets everyone's needs. Okay, so here are the areas we plan to focus on. Again, it's early, and we're sort of just evaluating things, but we would welcome input. This is going to be a cooperative effort, so if you're interested in maybe working with us down the road when we engage with the private sector, please let me know. Okay, the first area we're going to try to focus on in e-commerce is to remove barriers to help e-commerce grow in a safe, secure, and efficient fashion. We're sort of looking at everything. I mean, I think de minimis is an obvious example, not really a barrier. It's sort of something that we don't control. It's sort of a trade and commerce issue. But we think that having a duty-free zone would be a great thing. It would solve a lot of problems in terms of entry, in terms of customs formalities, in terms of, again, duty refunds, drawback, just all the procedures. And I think it would encourage people to send something to e-commerce. If you know you're not going to have a lot of customs problems on our end or the other end. Leveling the playing field, those of you who have worked with me or others in terms of advanced data and looking at the UPU versus express carriers versus cargo, this is not a new thing. It's just that we're trying to sort of level the playing field for all e-commerce players. We think this is important because you've got different regimes out there. In the postal process, it's generally been a little bit simpler. There hasn't been a lot of cost involved with it. So what we want to do, especially for e-commerce, is sort of level the playing field out there so that everybody's playing by the same rules. And that ties into number 3, which is to harmonize the data requirements to the extent possible. This is something we're working on with the USPS quite a bit, and the UPU in terms of getting data that we can use. We're sort of open to looking at the whole thing and saying, what data do we really need on the manifest or on the entry, and what could we do differently? So we're just sort of looking at all that. And again, a lot of the regulations have been in place a long time, and they don't really, maybe are not as forward-leaning as they need to be. So trying to look at all that. 4th, trusted trader concepts. I don't know if some of you are familiar with our CTPAT, our Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism. This is an industry partnership where we work with everybody in the supply chain. They do certain things to give us a level of comfort to reduce the risk. And this is something we think can be extended down to different players. And we think with different people in the e-commerce field, and as we've seen the last couple of days, there are a lot of partnerships out there, a lot of people involved with e-commerce. If we can work with them, sort of get some sense of what they're doing, have some trust in what they're doing, that helps them in terms, so we feel comfortable that we can not maybe do as much as we would do, and it's just helps them get their shipments in faster. Okay, in terms of fewer exams, knowing their supply chains. And the last thing is just, this is nothing new. This is how we do our business. We do risk-based targeting. Advanced data helps us with that, and to sort of look at e-commerce holistically and bring our best practices from cargo, from the express industry to e-commerce and all the players. I think it's going to help us sort of do things in a more efficient way. So again, this is something new we're looking at. We're looking at everything, and I think it could be a good thing. So that's all I had to say. That slides weren't too exciting, but thanks.